Hello and welcome back to the Christian Reeve Podcast. I'm going to start treating this like a show now. we've gotten we've gotten past 2 years with this show, and I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts from a range of different industries and everything from wrestling to just radio related content and you name it. And I've always done that. I've always been into different types of podcasts. I mean, I think it's kind of like a twofold thing for me in the sense that on one hand, I just enjoy listening to podcasts, but also I always find it quite inspiring and it gives me ideas. And I know I kept banging on and on and on about, doing more discussion based content. But for some reason, something was holding me back. And I think what it was this kind of like fear of doing this kind of content. I felt like for some time, I might need to like get someone else on the show just to kind of quasi interview me or discuss the topic. And hey, I've not completely thrown out that idea. I think that it's a very viable idea, and there's a lot of people that have been on the show beforehand that I'd love to have back on and to discuss various topics and whatnot. But and I've also tried to have like co-hosts in the past, and it just unfortunately didn't work out. But yeah, I just thought like, is it interesting enough to have a show where it's just one person speaking? I don't know, because there are shows that I'm aware of, podcasts that I'm aware of that are successful where it's just one person speaking. But I personally don't like to listen to those sorts of shows. I just feel more interested in conversations. And I kind of feel like, I mean, I don't want to like predict this from my own episodes, but I kind of feel like logically, any episodes I do with people will perform better than episodes that I've done on my own. But I don't know because, I released an episode recently, Quiet Quitting Your Job, which was just a random topic that I saw online that I found quite interesting. So I released it as a bonus episode. And, I still did research, but I did research on the day and it was very kind of thrown together like, okay, here's something. Let's see if this interests people, gets people thinking. And, I think it's a hot button topic. It's whenever you're talking about workplaces and stuff, that's going to get people, interested, talking for better or worse. But in general, doing discussion episodes, I found that they do seem to actually have good numbers on YouTube, Spotify, whatever the case may be, comparatively. So even sometimes better than some of my episodes where I'm speaking with people. So I guess my long-winded way of getting to the point here, because as you know, it takes me a while sometimes, and I try my best not to to just kind of like talk in nonsensically, but I kind of feel like maybe if I'm going to do a podcast or continue to keep doing a podcast, then I have to be able to get better at just talking randomly about whatever, but also trying to keep it structured to some extent. Because I listen to a lot of shows that don't have that structure, and it's just a bit of a mess, and it's kind of infuriating to follow. I feel like you have to have that structure in any podcast that you do. You have to have that structure. Don't worry, I will get to the topic very soon for today's show, and I'll break down what I'm going to talk to you about. But I just wanted to kind of highlight this at the beginning, and I think this will be probably the last time I actually talk about like, oh hey, guess what, I'm doing another discussion episode, and now I'm going to spend the next 5 or 10 minutes explaining why I think that this is risky or why I'm afraid of it or whatever. um, but yeah, to tell you the truth, the reason I'm afraid of it is because I just feel like I'm boring. I feel like if it's just me, that's not interesting. Um, but then I don't know. I really don't know. The numbers suggest something else. The numbers for the discussion episodes suggest that maybe these episodes are interesting. And if that's the case, I'm more than happy to do them. Because one really, really good thing about these discussion episodes is that they kind of give me an out if I have an instance where a guest drops out or I just don't have a guest or something. Then I don't have to rely on desperately seeking guests. I can also, you know, explore a topic, research a topic, and go at length at it, and form a podcast based on that. Um, Recently, I've started doing freelance writing again. I never stopped. I was always doing. I've always been doing freelance copywriting and writing in general since 2018. But recently, I had a shift. I was doing freelance sales, and then I shifted in the space of a month right back to writing articles again. But the reason I bring this up is that every article that I write, I do extensive research for. And it kind of reminded me a lot of how I structure a podcast, to be honest. It's a similar structure. And I find that really interesting because when you're building an article, or at least the way I build it, is I don't necessarily go from top to bottom. I kind of like find a bunch of headlines that make sense throughout that article and kind of piece it together slowly. And once I've got the basic structure of what I want to write, then I start writing. And that's, every article is pieced together differently, but that's essentially the same way that I approach it each and every time. And the way I approach a podcast is kind of similar. I'll sit there and I think, like, what's the point of this particular podcast? What is the point of this episode? And sometimes I struggle with that. I found recently that sometimes, and this happens to me in general conversation as well, I'll have moments where I kind of lose my point. I lose track of what I'm trying to achieve. And that's why it helps to have notes and stuff like that. Always have something that helps to guide you, keep you back on track. And sometimes it even happens when I have a guest on the show and I ask them a question, but in the middle of building up the question and giving it some context, I lose myself or I lose the question that I'm trying to present to the person. It happened with one of my guests, Arnold St. Paul, where and I was just off that day. It was a really, really hot day. I was stressed about different things. Maybe I should have rescheduled. I wasn't at my best, unfortunately. I still, I still think it's a good show, and I still put it out regardless. But I just felt like, nah, I let myself down here. I need to do better next time. I need to be on it at all times. But basically, my point is, I'm trying to avoid doing that, like losing myself, like trying to stay as focused as possible and not deviate too much from the point I'm trying to make, or like lose myself. Because while it might be good to lose yourself sometimes in a topic, at the end of the day, you don't want to completely lose it and then you're just rambling. And that's kind of my point. I don't want to ramble. And I guess this is just like an intro to this episode where I have been ironically rambling. But I just wanted to give you some context about why I'm going to sort of start doing more and more of these discussion episodes. And that leads me to, well, the beginning of a new series, really. I've been planning this dreams series. I don't know how many parts there's going to be, but I've already got some topics in mind. And out of all of them, this one is a topic that is a bit more fun. Not to say that the others won't be fun, but they're a bit more serious and a bit more scientific, whereas this one is just kind of, I don't know how to put this, random. But maybe if I explain some of the topics that I'm going through. So today's topic is strange and vivid dreams, weird and unusual dreams that I've had throughout my life. Ones in particular that I recall, because I don't know, when it comes to dreams, sometimes I remember them, but most of the time I forget them. But these dreams I've remembered. One of the dreams I had recently, actually, but we'll get to that at the end. But most of these dreams I've held on to for one reason or another. And I thought it might be interesting to share them with you, but to also maybe kind of discuss what the point behind them might be as well, because I know that was one idea I had for a dreams topic, was to kind of explore the meanings of dreams, and I think I might do that in some shape or capacity. Um, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I suffer from sleep paralysis and, to a acute extent, also sleep apnea. So that'll be one of the topics that will be coming up in this dreams series, or sleep and dreams series, I think I'm going to call it. And then this is the first part, strange and vivid dreams. And then I can't remember off the top of my head. I got it written down behind me, but I'm not going to go behind me. There's two other parts to it. There may be more. I don't know. Depends. If you have questions, things that you want to send in, by all means send them in, and maybe I can make a show out of that as well. But in any case, I thought having structure on top of structure might help. So obviously, I'm always going to have a structure for each and every show that I do. That's just how I roll. I'll panic otherwise, and I'll just lose myself. And it helps me to guide myself and keep on the right track. But I thought I would do this because it's stuff that's kind of close to me, close to my heart, stuff that I'm dealing with and have dealt with throughout my life. And that's kind of always been a theme with every topic that I've done. I try to explore it from like a general perspective, maybe a scientific perspective if there's that angle on it, and also my personal perspective. Anything that I can share an opinion on that I've personally dealt with or have experiences of, I feel like that makes for a more interesting show. But that's just my opinion. What do I know? But this is the first part, strange and vivid dreams. So why don't we just jump straight into it? Because I've rambled on now for 12 minutes, wasted enough time. If you haven't left me already, then thank you very much for getting up to this point. And yeah, here we go. So one of the first dreams that I remember, and I can't remember when I had this. I think I had this sometime around my early 20s, maybe. The dream is basically, well, when I was younger, I used to go to a lot of skate parks. I did skateboarding for about 7 or 8 years. I started when I was 11 years old, and I think I stopped around 17, 18. Picked it up briefly when I was at uni again, but basically it was a thing that I did in my teenage years. Anyway, there were particular skate parks that I went to near where I lived, and also up in London where I grew up. And I suppose it's inevitable that, you spend enough time in certain places, they're going to become part of your dreams. I mean, that's happened in plenty of other dreams I've had, where I've kind of been in a building or seen a building or a house or something that has remnants of things from real life, or it feels like somewhere I'm familiar with, but it's not. There's been other times when I've been in a place where I'm absolutely certain that it's a place that I've been before within the dream. And sometimes in the dream, I'll recognize like, oh, this is such and such place. And I'll actually maybe even realize in the dream that, hey, I'm dreaming. This is from the real world and I'm actually in dream state. But what will happen more often than not is I'll be in the building or in the space or wherever it is, and I'll be like, oh, that's not quite right. And that's different. And that doesn't look quite right. Anyway, this particular dream was about a skate park that I used to go to that was quite close to somewhere that I lived actually at one point. And for the most part, the skate park resembled in the dream what it looks like in real life, or at least at the time. But the gaping difference from buildings perspective was that in the far right corner, there was this random building. And of course, in real life, it's just a skate park with just like a sort of a high, medium level fence around it. A few ramps here and there. It's all metal ramps, and that's it. Not really much else to say. But this building in the corner just kind of sits there, and it's one of those flat level, officey type buildings. It kind of reminded me, for the UK listeners of this show, you may recall when you were growing up, there was those temporary buildings that they always said were temporary, but now they've been there for like 20, 30 odd years. So they were actually just cheap buildings that they never intended to create. Maybe at one time they actually planned to replace that spot with a real building, and that was actually just a temporary fix. But in any case, those temporary buildings were in each and every single school, seemingly, because many primary school kids and even secondary school kids have spoken about having memories of temporary buildings. And it makes me laugh because it's like, oh, okay, so that's just something they had everywhere then, I guess. All right, then. But anyway, this building in this dream sort of resembled that. And it was kind of like the Doctor Who TARDIS in the sense that it's bigger on the inside. Looks like a small, tiny, square-like building, but it's much bigger on the inside. But we'll get there. The skate park looked different. In real life, it's a metal skate park. I do remember when I was a kid, actually, that sometimes in the middle of summer, if you fell down on the ramp, and obviously it's a metal, so it tracks the heat, it would hurt so much. Your arms would literally burn if you were on it. And of course, we would all have our shirts off and stuff and wearing shorts, so we would burn even more. So fun times. And I remember, falling on metal ramps hurts quite a bit. Hello, siren, ruining my podcast. I'd have no luck. I live right next to a main road, so I just have to deal with it. There you go. It probably won't sound as loud for you, but for me, it's deafeningly loud. Anyway, I remember the pain of falling on these ramps. It wasn't that bad. You get used to it, but, it was painful enough. In this dream, however, all the ramps were made of wood. And, falling on wood is not as painful as falling on metal in real life. But in the dream, obviously, it had that kind of experience of, when nothing hurts. I find this happens a lot in dreams. There's several tropes that happen in dreams. Some of them include the inability to run or running really slowly, or, you're trying to get away from the monster or whatever, and you just can't. Or it will be time moving differently, or just things in the real world that work in the way that they work do not apply in dreams, seemingly. And so I remember in the dream, instead of being on skateboards and bicycles and stuff like that, we were all on like children's bicycles, like tricycle, like, those little things that toddlers sort of cycle on. We were all riding on those for some reason. And I seemed to be the only one falling over, I think. But no one cared. No, it wasn't embarrassing or anything like that. I do remember in the dream being worried of that, but then I immediately realized it didn't matter because my bigger fear of falling over and hurting myself was it wasn't something to be scared of because it just didn't happen. So I'm just kind of like, okay, all right then. This is odd. I don't think in the dream I'd realized it was a dream. So I was just sitting there like, what's going on? What is this? Anyway, I sort of throw the bicycle away and walk over to the building. I don't know what my rationale was. I guess I'm just kind of like, what's going on? I want to explore what's in this building. I've always been like that as a person, too curious for my own good. I always just want to know. Nosy, maybe is the word. Anyway, I walk into the building and I recall that there was just a series of various different hallways with massive windows, and it just went forever. I just kept walking around, and I remember there was kind of like blue carpets, those awful blue carpets that you sometimes got in those school buildings. It just looked like school buildings, like the connecting school buildings at like a senior school or a primary school or something like that. Not bad or terrible in any way, just unimaginative and, just boring corridors, I guess. But then suddenly I walk out of a particular door and lo and behold, I'm in the middle of the ocean and I look up and there's a huge mountain. So this is where the big cliche comes. So I'm looking at this mountain, and then at some point I attempt to start climbing it, and I think I get about a quarter of the way up, and then boom, I wake up. So naturally, I'd never looked into the meaning of that, but I assume that the meaning is supposed to be something along the lines of, I have this obstacle in my life that I need to overcome, and it's like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, that kind of stuff. but I never really looked into it. But I just figured it was something like that. Or maybe just a really, really odd dream, you know? Sometimes you just get odd dreams. But one thing that's interesting, and I've seen this with dreams like, losing your teeth, because I have a lot of dreams. Actually, that's reminded me, because I'd forgotten about this. I have so many dreams where I lose teeth. It's bizarre, and it feels so real as well. I know there'll always be a part of the dream where I sort of walk into a bathroom and desperately try and like put all the teeth back in my mouth and fix it. And then the weird thing about it is in the dream, it'll fix itself and I'll suddenly be calm again. And then I'll wake up. Weird. But my point with that was that when I looked into the interpretations of what it means to lose your teeth within a dream, there was like 100 different interpretations. So I don't know, when it comes to interpreting dreams, and maybe that's something we can look at one day as a topic for this series. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. I don't know where to begin, because some of them sound plausible, some of them sound kind of outlandish, and then some of them conflict with each other and they say the opposite of each other. So it's really hard to tell like where you stand with that stuff. Anyway, let's move on. I've had a lot of dreams, like horrible dreams, and this is going to form sort of the rest of this podcast. This is a very short dream. I had a dream about I guess like a serial killer or something like that, and they're running around with like a knife or something like that. It looks like a large dagger, and they're trying to kill me. But the thing is, normally in a dream like that, you'd be terrified. I wasn't scared at all. I remember being a bit weirded out by the freakiness of this, killer. But at the same time, I wasn't concerned at all. I didn't have that impending doom-like feeling that you sometimes get in those dreams where you feel like, no, 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 don't catch me. Like, oh, if you catch me, you're going to kill me. That kind of fear. I didn't have that. And I distinctly remember there was a really weird part of the dream where we're in like a massive, I don't know, like one of those old style school gyms or something like that. The ones that are like built probably in the 70s or whatever, and they've never changed. They've just always looked the same. And for some reason, there was a piano in the far corner of one of them. And I chose to run and hide behind the piano. And then the killer, I sort of look up. At one point, the killer's walking towards me. And the next, I, turn, it's like a horror movie. I turn, look to my left, and the killer's looking at me, smiling. And then I wake up, I think. And I wasn't scared. Even when I woke up, I was just like, what was that about? Like, what was the point of that? And that's kind of the frustrating thing is I always wake up from these dreams thinking like, what is the purpose of this? What does this mean? I would love to know what this means. Because if it means nothing, maybe it's just a wild ride and it's fun. But I kid you not, some of these dreams feel very, very real. Disturbingly so. Sometimes they weird me out for a long time. They freak me out. And this next dream is the worst dream I've ever had in my life. I remember it vividly. And I think the main reason, other than the dark, horrible themes, the main reason why I remember it is because it feels like the plot of a horror movie. And actually, for some time, I thought about maybe turning this into like an actual screenplay for a horror movie. But I'm just sharing it on this podcast. If someone wants to make it into a movie, go right ahead. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. So I had this horrible dream where I'm walking in some woods, very, very tall trees. It's one of those kind of forests you could kind of lose yourself in. And I appear to be with school friends. And one thing I just want to say on a side note is a lot of the time, in my experience, when I've had people I know in dreams, they'll never quite look like how they look in real life. Sometimes they'll be exactly how they look in real life, but like maybe their personality is different or something like that. Like they're never just their actual selves. But in this dream, it was more or less spot on. One of them was someone I recognized. The other one I couldn't really distinguish, but I understood in the dream that, okay, these are people that I go to school with or something like that. And I remember that it was three of us, and they were walking slightly ahead of me. And I remember feeling a sense of like fear and doom, like we shouldn't be walking into this forest, like this is dodgy, we should keep going back. It was literally like a horror movie. Like think about how many horror movie plots have you seen where there's like three characters or four characters and there's one person saying, no, 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 we shouldn't go there, man. Like, what if this happens? It was exactly like that. But like I felt like a deep kind of um impending dread within the dream. And I recall that we got to something looking like a wooden cabin, which had these like glass panel. It had like a big, huge window glass panel see through door. And I remember looking at it and instantly saying to the friends in the dream, like, we shouldn't go near this. This is dangerous. We should head back. And they were kind of like mocking me in a kind of friendly way, like, oh, haha, don't be such a fraidy cat. There's nothing to be scared of, etc. But I remember thinking, like, in the dream, no, 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 this is serious. This is real. We need to get away from this. Anyway, we eventually walk up to the cabin. They kind of run inside. And before I can actually, I tell a lie. So there was no, that window that I just explained, the window door thing, wasn't actually the entrance. There was either an open door or like just an open space that you could walk in. I think it was just pitch black actually. But when I walked into the house, that was it. Then I saw that window pane, see-through door thing. And immediately there was like a switch, you know, like how sometimes in dreams there's like a kind of, it doesn't move like how like a normal story or normal life works, you know. It's like a shift almost. And now there's another shift that occurs in this dream, but in this particular moment it goes from me being concerned to them behind that window pane glass door, my friends in the dream screaming, saying, help, 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 like, please help us, you know. And I'm desperately trying to get to them and I can't get to them. And in the dream, it sort of implies, I can't see them, but it implies that there's like killers behind them trying to get them. And I can't get to them. Then another shift occurs. So we go from that. It's almost like skipping a scene in a movie. And you're like, what just happened? I then skip to what looks like a old 18th century school or something like that. It's like a period drama almost, and it looks like it's an all girls school for like maybe young girls between the ages of like 11 to 15, something like that. And they're all standing on like American style bleachers, and it kind of looks like a class photo, something like that. And but then it kind of also looks like maybe like an assembly, like a serious assembly. But I immediately in the dream link it to the events that just happened before. I'm like, hang on, there's a connection here. Like something terrible has happened. And from what I understand of the dream, it kind of implies that that cabin in the woods maybe has been like home to terrible deeds and it's connected with this like girls' school. And like when I remember looking at the faces of the girls in the crowd on the bleachers, some of them had like somber looking faces, like to suggest that like dark and terrible things have happened. And I remember there was like a plinth, or you know, like those things that you get in commencement speeches or whatever when people are speaking at a stand. There was one of them, and there's like a teacher who's talking about the events, but I can't quite hear what they're saying. Like they're not really making any sense. They're just saying like terrible, something terrible has happened. Da, 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 da. And then I wake up, which is very frustrating because I was like, well, I wanted to know more. I want to investigate the dream. You know, if this were a movie, this would feel like the beginning of the movie. So I'm just wondering what's going on. But in all seriousness, like I had a very disturbing feeling when I woke up. It felt very real. Surreal would be a better word. And every now and again, I'll have a dream like that. And normally, I've noticed a connection between having those types of dreams and then things I've sort of done from the night before. So, for example, if I went to bed at a weird time, then I'm more likely to have a nightmare like that. If I was drinking the night before, I'm more likely to have nightmares. Whenever my pattern is interfered, not pattern, sleeping pattern is interfered with, that's when I have those dreams. And I always seem to dream, or at least it feels like I'm dreaming in the morning. That's the thing. The dream prolongs and it feels like its most realist point just before I wake up. And maybe that's not true. I don't know, but that's how it feels. And that connects me to a dream I had last night as I record this. And I think this is kind of the motivation behind me doing this particular episode and sort of prompting me to push forward this dream series. As I mentioned at the beginning of this show, I suffer from sleep paralysis and sleep apnea. And I will at one point do an extensive episode on both of those topics and tell you about all my experiences with regards to that. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up in this episode is to kind of illustrate that I've had some days here and there in more recent times, in more recent years, where it's kind of been, quite prevalent, quite distressing. But it's kind of slowed down, and I'll go into more detail in that episode. Let me know if you want to hear it. But suffice to say, it's sort of calmed down a little bit. But last night was one of the worst bouts I've had in quite a few years. Because normally when it happens, I'm able to sort of calm myself down, like I'm consciously aware that it's happening. But in this instance, I remember really like jolting myself and really trying to force myself to wake up, and it was not working. And I really felt like I was suffocating at one point. And in connection to that, I also had this dream last night, which I don't remember the majority of the dream, but this is what I do remember. And I've written it down here so I didn't forget anything. I was sitting at a table surrounded by a few other men. It seems like we were working for someone, like there's a manager there that I can't quite see, but they're there and they're either angry or they just don't like us. They don't treat us with any respect. And I'm just kind of sitting there, like kind of downtrodden, I suppose. And this manager basically throws like a severance package in the form of a pay packet at the guy beside me. So it's like one of those old, pay packets that you get with like cash in it. And they've written on it laters, implying that the manager is basically serving this as a severance package. Like, yeah, bye, see you later, you're fired, here's your final pay kind of thing. Very kind of that distasteful way of firing someone. And I looked at that and then looked back at the table, and then the boss throws one at me, and I look down at it, and then I sort of look to the guy next to me, and he kind of goes, yep, like, guess you're fired too, kind of thing. Then I wake up, although I didn't wake up normally, did I? I experienced that bout of sleep paralysis and sleep apnea, and it sucked. But hey, it prompted me to do this episode, and I don't know that we'll ever really know for definite the point of dreams, especially our strangest and most vivid dreams. But I like to think that whether they have a point or not, they do demonstrate that the mind is always working and processing things, and whether that's subconsciously or consciously, that can only be a good thing, I read recently, I was doing some research with regards to dreams, and I read something that said that one of the ways that you can help yourself with sleeping is to write things down on a piece of paper that you're trying to figure out in your mind, like basically doing, if you've got problems that you need to solve, the best thing you can do before going to sleep is to write down either some thoughts or an answer or something to those problems on a piece of paper, and then put it down and then go to sleep. Because then your brain will essentially like stop trying to solve the problem, which in turn will prevent you from staying awake. Because that's always a danger, isn't it? When you're up at night and your brain is still racing and you just can't stop thinking. And it's great sometimes if you're a creative, you can use that to your advantage, but sometimes it's just not useful at all. Sometimes it's just very distressing, and I don't know, you're just sitting there and you're just thinking about things that happened years and years and years ago, or you're thinking about things that you're dealing with in your life at that point in time, and you can't change them. So you're just sitting there with your thoughts, getting anxious, getting worried and concerned because you can't sleep properly. And you're just like, what do I do with this? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I mean, I would like to think that you're supposed to try and address those problems, if at all possible. It seems very logical, doesn't it? And certainly all the information online about dreams seems to suggest that the more anxious dreams we have, or the more stressful dreams we have, they're supposed to represent things. They're supposed to be like messages telling us like, hey, you need to do something about this thing that you're worried about or concerned about, or, whatever the case may be. But then it also seems to be, as I mentioned before, a response to physiological changes. So if you drastically change your sleeping pattern, or if you find yourself drinking for too late, or you stay up past your bedtime or something like that, then it can just escalate into completely messing your sleeping pattern and then causing you to have nightmares. But it's weird, I mean, I don't really have nightmares as such. I have these like weird dreams, but I never really wake up feeling scared. There's only one instance I've had of that, which I'll cover in the sleep paralysis / sleep apnea episode. So you'll have to wait to see that, to listen to that. But as I recall, that's the only instance that I can think of where it's actually happened. I've woken up, sweating and stuff like that, but not really in relation to nightmares. It's just a lot of the time, the only time I've ever really like woken up scared is whenever I've had a bout of sleep paralysis. And that's not because of the dream. The concern for me is, waking up, not being able to wake up, like having something stunting my ability to wake up. It's terrifying, to be honest. Then again, we'll cover it in more detail. More detail. I never know how to pronounce things properly. When we get there to that episode. But let me know your thoughts on this episode. I know it was a shorter episode, and I kind of feel like maybe it's not as good as I thought it would be. I thought I could share a lot of dreams and be like, hey, yeah, this is really interesting, isn't it? But now I'm listening back to it and I'm like, it's the ramblings of a madman. But I don't know. Everyone has different opinions. These are just my thoughts and feelings on these dreams. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. Let me know if you have any questions related to this topic. As I say, I've got a few ideas in mind for this dream series. Very excited to continue doing these discussion-based episodes and continue moving forward with, different style of content. Just going back to that, feel free to send me ideas for things that you'd like me to cover. Whether that's stuff that's going on in the world right now or just general topics that I can work around. I mean, depending on what the topic is, I might be able to find a personal angle to it as well and be able to share some personal insight or experiences or whatever the case may be. Because I feel like that is when a topic is really, really interesting. When you get personal insight, stories, experiences, things you can are real, that the person is sharing about their own life and experiences. That feels much more interesting than just listening to I don't know, basic facts. But then again, I don't know, maybe that's your thing. If you're into basic fact based style podcasts, then that would be ideal, wouldn't it? Um, can you tell I'm rambling yet? It's time to close it down. Wind down, Christian. Come on. Time to end the episode. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you're enjoying the show as much as I am. I hope that you enjoy these discussion-based episodes. Let me know if you do. Let me know if you don't. Just let me know. Thank you so much for listening. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.